two men, same city, same year, same $3,000 monthly salary. 20 years from now, one of them will be worth over $1 million. The other will still be anxious about money, still one bad month away from financial pressure, still wondering why it never came together. And here is the part that should bother you. Their salaries were never the difference. Right now, somewhere, there are men earning $15,000 a month who will die with nothing meaningful to show for it financially. And there are men earning $3,000 a month who will quietly, methodically build a level of freedom that most high earners will never touch. Wealth is not a salary. It is a behavior repeated long enough to become unstoppable. But most men never discover this, not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't work hard enough, but because they were handed a completely wrong map at the start of the journey, and they followed it faithfully all the way to the wrong destination. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how a man earning $3,000 a month can build a $1 million portfolio. The math is real. The timeline is realistic, but more importantly, I'm going to show you why most men fail long before money ever becomes the problem. Because if you're waiting for your income to rise before you start, you may already be behind. Let's get into it. The most expensive lie most men ever believe is this: I'll start building wealth when I earn more. That sentence has quietly destroyed more financial futures than any recession, any market crash, any job loss in history. Because here is what actually happens when income rises without the right foundation underneath it. The man earns $3,000. He feels constrained. He tells himself the problem is the number. So he works harder, gets promoted, earns $5,000. And almost immediately, the apartment gets upgraded, the car gets upgraded, the subscriptions multiply, the dinners get more expensive, the wardrobe follows. His lifestyle inflated to meet his income within 6 months. He is now spending $4,800 of his $5,000. He feels slightly less anxious, but no closer to freedom. Then he earns $8,000. Same pattern, different number. By the time he is earning $12,000 a month, he has a lifestyle that costs $11,500 to maintain. He looks successful. He feels successful. He has the car and the apartment and the watch that signal he has arrived. But he has almost no assets, almost no ownership, almost nothing that would survive if the income stopped for 3 months. He is not wealthy. He is performing wealth. And performing wealth is the single most effective way to ensure you never actually build it. Meanwhile, the man who stayed at $3,000 and asked a different question entirely is doing something that will change the entire trajectory of his life. He is not asking, how do I earn more? He is asking, how much of what I earn can I convert into assets that work without me? That question, asked consistently, answered honestly, acted on methodically, is the entire game. And you don't need a large income to start playing it. You need clarity, discipline, and enough time for the math to do what math does when you leave it alone long enough. Let's talk about numbers, not to overwhelm, but to show you what is actually possible. Because most men have never seen this laid out honestly. A man earning $3,000 a month takes home $36,000 a year. If he lives on $2,000 and invests $1,000 every single month, he is putting $12,000 a year to work. That sounds modest. It is modest. That's the point. At a 10% average annual return, which is roughly the historical average of the S&P 500 over any 20-year period, that $1,000 monthly investment becomes $759,000 in 25 years. Not because he earned more, because he started and didn't stop. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting, because most men underestimate the back half of compounding. In year 1, he has $12,600. In year 5, he has $77,000. Respectable, but not dramatic. In year 15, $414,000. In year 20, $687,000. In year 25, $759,000. And in year 30, $1,130,000. The money doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows slowly at first. Then it accelerates. Then it becomes almost violent in its momentum. That acceleration in the back half, that is compounding. And compounding is the closest thing to a financial superpower that an ordinary man with an ordinary income has access to. But it requires one thing that most men find psychologically brutal. It requires doing nothing dramatic for a very long time. No big moves, no timing the market, no waiting for the right moment, just consistency, month after month after month, while the world around you celebrates people making faster money in louder ways. The man who can do that, who can be boring with money while others are being thrilling, is the man who wins this game. And he can do it on $3,000 a month. So if the math works, and it does, then why don't more men do this? Because the enemy is not the income. The enemy has a different name. It is lifestyle inflation, and it is the most socially acceptable form of financial self-destruction that exists. Lifestyle inflation is not extravagance. It doesn't look like obvious stupidity. It looks like progress. It feels like reward. It is wearing the clothes of success while quietly dismantling the foundation of it. It works like this. A man gets a raise. His brain, trained by years of cultural conditioning, immediately begins scanning for upgrades: a better apartment, a newer car, a nicer gym, a higher tier of restaurant. The raise disappears not into waste, but into a slightly more expensive version of the same life. And the tragedy is that none of these upgrades are individually unreasonable. The apartment is nicer. The car is more reliable. The food is better quality. Each decision makes local sense. But the cumulative effect is that every income increase gets absorbed before it can be deployed. The man earns more and more and saves almost the same percentage, which is almost nothing. Meanwhile, his asset base stays flat. His net worth grows slowly, if at all. His financial anxiety doesn't decrease with his income because the lifestyle he's maintaining now requires the income. He has built a structure that needs to be constantly fed. This is the trap. Not low income, expanding obligation. There is a principle worth understanding here, and it is one of the most psychologically difficult truths in personal finance. The man who earns $3,000 and lives on $1,800 is in a stronger financial position than the man who earns $10,000 and lives on $9,500. Not in terms of comfort, not in terms of appearances, but in terms of freedom, in terms of trajectory, in terms of what the next decade will actually look like for each of them. Because the first man has a gap between income and expenditure that he can direct toward ownership. The second man has almost no gap at all. He is fully consumed by his own lifestyle. The gap is everything, not the income, the gap. And the gap is a choice, a daily, ongoing, renewable choice that any man can make regardless of what he earns. Let's get specific, because inspiration without a structure is just entertainment. Here is what the $3,000 a month man who becomes a millionaire actually does differently. Not in theory, in practice. First, he pays himself before he pays anyone else. The moment his paycheck arrives, before rent, before food, before any bill, a fixed amount moves automatically into an investment account. Not what's left over at the end of the month, the first allocation, always. This sounds simple. It is psychologically brutal because it means living on less before the month has even begun. It means the lifestyle is built around what remains, not the other way around. But it also means the investment is guaranteed. It doesn't compete with discretionary spending. It doesn't get sacrificed when something more urgent appears. It leaves before temptation arrives. Automate the wealth building. Make it structural. Make it invisible. Make it non-negotiable. Second, he invests into index funds and does not touch them. He does not pick individual stocks. He does not try to time the market. He does not move money based on news headlines or what a friend told him was going to be the next big thing. He buys a broad market index fund consistently every month in good markets and bad markets, when prices are rising and when they are falling. And when prices fall, when headlines are frightening and everyone around him is panicking, he does not sell. He buys more. Because falling prices mean the same monthly investment buys a larger ownership stake in the same productive businesses. Volatility is not the enemy of the long-term investor. It is the discount mechanism, the patient man's ally. Most men intellectually understand this. Very few behave accordingly when the moment actually comes. The man who can maintain his behavior when the market drops 30% is the man the compounding math rewards most generously. Third, he protects the gap aggressively. When income increases, and it will, even modestly over time, he does not allow the lifestyle to automatically absorb the difference. He makes a deliberate decision. A portion of every raise goes directly to increasing the monthly investment. Not all of it. He is allowed to enjoy some of the progress. But a meaningful portion, at least half, goes into the machine. This is the behavior that separates the man who reaches 7 figures from the man who earns 7 figures and never keeps any of it. Every income increase is an opportunity to widen the gap, to buy more time, to accelerate the timeline. Most men narrow the gap automatically through lifestyle inflation. The wealth-building man widens it deliberately. Fourth, he understands the difference between assets and expenses that look like assets. A car is not an asset. It is a depreciating liability that costs money to maintain. A luxury apartment is not wealth. It is a recurring expense that builds no equity. Assets are things that produce value or appreciate over time independent of your direct labor. Stocks, index funds, real estate generating rental income, a business with systems that operate without you. The cultural markers of success, the car, the watch, the apartment, are almost entirely in the expense category. They signal arrival. They do not create it. The man who delays the signals of success in order to acquire the substance of it is playing a different game entirely, a quieter game, a slower game, but a game with a very different ending. Here is the part most financial videos skip, because it is harder to make a clean graphic about. The biggest obstacle to building wealth on an ordinary income is not mathematical, it is psychological. We live in a world that has industrialized the performance of success. Social media shows curated financial achievement. Advertising sells the feeling of arrival constantly. The culture celebrates visible success and renders invisible patience meaningless. A man driving a modest car while investing $1,000 a month gets no acknowledgement from anyone. Nobody comments on his discipline. Nobody notices his growing portfolio. His choices are invisible. Meanwhile, the man who just leased a new car gets compliments at work. He gets the nod of approval that the social world gives to people who are performing the right signals. And the human brain, which evolved to care deeply about social status and peer perception, registers this feedback. It pulls toward the visible reward. It pulls away from the invisible discipline. This is why so many men who understand the math still don't follow through. Not because they're weak, because they're human, And being human means caring what your environment reflects back at you. The men who overcome this don't do it by caring less about status. They do it by redefining what status means to them. The man who has built a $400,000 portfolio on a modest income has something no leased car can provide. He has options. He can leave a job that disrespects him. He can take a risk on something he believes in. He can weather a crisis without panic. He can make decisions from strength instead of desperation. That is real status, not the signal of status, the actual thing. And once a man has experienced the security of a growing asset base, once he has felt what it means to have the month's expenses covered not by anxiety, but by structure, the pull of the performance weakens. Because the performance was always a substitute for the real thing. And once you have the real thing, the substitute loses its appeal. But you have to get there first. And getting there requires tolerating a period where you are doing the right things and receiving almost no visible confirmation that it is working. That period, the long, invisible middle, is where most men quit. The ones who don't quit, the ones who trust the math and hold the behavior, are the ones that compounding eventually rewards with something irreplaceable. Not just money, freedom, actual freedom. The kind that doesn't depend on a paycheck arriving next Friday. So let's come back to the two men. Same city, same starting salary, same $3,000 a month. The first man spends the next decade chasing income. He gets raises, he upgrades his life with each one. He looks like he's winning, he feels like he's winning, and in many ways, by the metrics the world shows him, he is. The second man lives more modestly. He drives the same car for 8 years. He doesn't upgrade the apartment the moment he can afford to. He invests every month without exception. He widens the gap every time his income grows. From the outside, for most of that decade, the first man looks like he's ahead. And then something shifts. The portfolio crosses $200,000, then $300,000. The compounding begins to accelerate. The monthly contributions are now a smaller percentage of the growth than the returns are. The machine is running on its own momentum. The second man doesn't need to work harder. He needs to not interfere. And 20 years after they both started, the man who earned more, spent more, and performed success is starting to worry about retirement with almost no assets to show for the income. The man who earned $3,000 a month and asked a different question has a portfolio worth over $1 million. Not because he was lucky, not because he had some secret advantage, but because he understood something early enough to act on it. Wealth is not about what you earn. It is about what you keep, what you convert, and how long you leave it alone. The salary was never the story. The behavior was always the story. And behavior is the one variable in this entire equation that has nothing to do with how much your employer decides to pay you. $3,000 a month is enough. The question was never the salary. The question was always, what kind of man are you going to be with it?